Welcome to the Redefining Strength podcast. Everything you need to succeed on your health and fitness journey, even the stuff you don't want to hear. I am very lazy, and I own this fact, embrace this fact, and I would actually say this is what leads to my success. But part of when I say I'm lazy, what I'm really doing is recognizing that sometimes it is not only okay, but good to do the minimum. And doing the minimum doesn't mean you're just sort of passing the buck or you're not trying to optimize your results. It's not mediocre, as Michelle put it, which I'm super excited to be joined by Michelle so we can really dive into this. But Michelle, let's talk about why doing the minimum is sometimes the best way to see the best results. And it's okay to own our lazy, so to speak.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think when we talk about the minimums, we often think partly because we are in a society where we kind of value like people that are constantly going, constantly pushing, constantly doing it all. Like that's what people post about on social media. People tend not to post when they're doing the minimum. They tend to share when they're going all out. But it's in these moments of doing the minimum where we're actually staying consistent, and consistency leads to results. Being able to make sure even in those moments that you have a lot going on, your schedule's changing, things are just kind of pulling you in different directions, you have these habits that you continue with, and those habits are going to what keeps you to have success. So it's really about keeping you moving forward and really making sure that you're not getting to that point where it's all or nothing. So often, Corey, you talk about, if you get a flat tire, you don't slash the other three. Doing the minimum is making sure that we're not slashing the other tires.
It's actually funny to think about, but I would say a lot of us have a comfort zone on pushing harder, all or nothing. Like it is comfortable to be in control in that way. And the discomfort comes by loosening the reins a little bit. And what we don't realize though is that this inability to loosen the reins strategically, proactively is what leads to the restriction. And then the completely self-sabotaging falling off summer party mode goes into holiday season, goes into starting over January mode. And so if we can really embrace that we're stepping outside our comfort zone to do the harder thing by doing less instead of just taking pride in it, as you mentioned, the better off we're going to be. And it's not an easy thing to do. How can we approach doing the minimum and help ourselves embrace the discomfort of that?
Yeah, I love that you're saying that because it is hard. It is because we tend not to trust ourselves. We tend not to trust ourselves. And this is where that all or nothing kind of comes into play. And I'm going to steal this because we actually had our fabulous coach Liz and coach Christy also speak on this. And they touched on anchor habits. And I loved that comment so much because so instead of talking about minimums, these minimums are your anchor habits. It's the ones that you are going to make sure that you can do even on your toughest day. They're going to align with what you're valuing at the time. And I think it's important to recognize that those values can kind of shift during seasons, and that's okay. They should. Your approach should also be able to shift, and that allows you some of that flexibility. And it's really about making sure that we have these anchor habits so that we can build momentum. So when you do have the time where you can kind of maybe be a little bit more aggressive in your approach, you are not starting completely over from ground zero. You're actually getting ahead. And that is something that we do with minimums is you are actually able to be further ahead because it's a pattern disruption. In the past, if you're all or nothing, this is a way to disrupt that pattern that you often repeat where you're still staying consistent. So not all of a sudden, this is where we kind of get into that habit of I gain and lose the same 10 pounds over and over again. This is breaking that.
And when we're thinking about the anchors, what we're really thinking about is what do I ultimately need to be better than I was at the same time of year? Instead of saying, hey, how can I maintain the exact same habits I had from January to maybe Cinco de Mayo or the summer? What can I do compared to last summer to create those fundamental foundational habits that move me forward, those 1% improvements? And so I think when we're thinking about it, we think oh, well, I need to track. Okay, well, why do you need to track? How is tracking helpful at this time of year? What would be the easiest way to track? And think about the effort. Because a lot of times we think about how many changes we're making, more or less, but not the effort of the changes we're making. And I've brought this up in the past, and I think it's such a key thing. But what might not have felt like a lot of effort from January till now might have started to feel like a little bit more effort because we get bored, so to speak. We start to feel a little like down in the things we're repeating. Like we do want something shiny or new or faster, or we don't always want to do what we should, right? So what didn't feel like a lot of effort in terms of hitting a macro ratio might all of a sudden feel like a lot more effort just because you're even tracking. And so you might notice that you're not hitting your macros, and then you're seeing the scale go up and you're feeling like you're still giving the same amount of effort, and you don't realize those 1% deviations because of that effort. So it's really key as you think about those anchor habits. It's like, what do you ultimately need to be a little bit better than you were last year? But also recognizing that the effort involved in some of the habits that didn't feel as much effort was needed before might now feel like a lot more intensity is going into them. So it's like, how do we sort of navigate that to find what the anchor habits really can be, even knowing that we're going to have to evolve?
I love that because it is that perceived level of effort that you're putting in. And one of the things that I do see is like, like March was like a great time. I was able to hit that heart ratio. Well, now we're hitting summer and yeah, you were able to hit that heart ratio, but now you have, those backyard barbecues, more opportunities where alcohol is kind of being presented to you, more foods that maybe you're being or sorry, more events you're being invited to where food may not be 100% in your control. So yeah, that perceived it's going to feel like a higher level of effort because it's not the same environment.
And we don't even recognize sometimes the way that that all or nothing attitude is impacting us, like hormonally, emotionally, right? We just all of a sudden hit I got a flat tire, I'm slashing the other three, I'm lighting the car on fire by the side of the road, and I'm walking away. We get to that extreme sort of giving up point because we don't realize the accumulation of things or the pattern we repeated. We like honestly even sort of look back at with rose-colored glasses at the habits we've done, right? We've gained weight and we're looking to lose weight, and we go, well, this worked in the past. No, it didn't, because you're back where you started. So yes, that might be your strategy, but you didn't have an exit strategy. So part of it might have worked, but it's really assessing the impact of the all or nothing attitude on so many different components, not just even the habits themselves. Like, I mean, what do we see when we get that all or nothing attitude and how it really sabotages our mindsets, our body, all the different things so that we can't create those lasting changes?
Yeah, when you are kind of doing those things where all those things are kind of changing and you know, these are things that are outside of your control. You can't control that the season changes. You can't control that everyone else's schedules around you is going to change, which is going to force your schedule to change. And if there's always that saying, if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. And this is really where we see spikes in cortisol. We see stall like being kind of flatlined and fat loss. We see energy somewhat draining. We see those sleep disruptions. You are more often, I mean, the sun's out longer. You're more likely to be staying up late, sleeping a little bit less. And this is really where we even see it can lead to even injury or inflammation. If you're not planning that this is a season that's going to shift and change and is outside of your control, you aren't actually preparing yourself for the best things, which is how can you actually protect yourself in the season to make sure your cortisol isn't getting spiked. The other thing I often see is, sometimes I'll have women that be like, oh, summer's easy for me because I eat less, so it's easy to stay in a deficit. And that may sound like a good thing because honestly, heat does actually disrupt your appetite. It can actually lead to you eating less. And that, again, for some, that may sound like sweet. That's a great deal. But if you are not eating enough calories and you are slowly disrupting your metabolism, yeah, you maybe even be one of those that you're like, oh, I'm fine in the summer. I actually lose weight in the summer. But it's actually that level of decreased appetite and decreased caloric intake that actually is leading you to fail in the fall because you're not consuming enough. So you're actually causing harm to your metabolism. So instead of eating enough and making it so you can build in the fall, you're hitting a wall in the fall.
You're also potentially not recognizing changes in activity level, which then impact how you're fueling in the fall as well. Where if you are eating more with the summer, but your activity level increased and you don't own that, If you keep eating the same amount in the fall, that can also sabotage you. So it's really recognizing all those changes to meet yourself where you're at. But it's as you said, recognizing all the other shifts going on outside of your control to control what you can control, but recognizing almost the mantras we need for different times of year. Like January till the spring or even early summer, you might have like sacrifices for success might be your mantra because you are willing to do more to really see that result. You don't have as many things come up. Your schedule is optimized for specific things. But maybe during the summer and into the holiday season, it is a slowdown to speed up. Maybe in the middle of the fall, you have a little phase where you can make some more sacrifices. But it's not bad to own those things because what ultimately builds results and what we don't recognize is the importance of maintaining previous progress, because the more we can maintain previous progress, the more we create that set point off of which to build. And that's incredibly valuable because our body fights the weight loss process. So if you're trying to lose weight and you've lost the weight, right, your body's trying to return to what it thought was balanced. So if even just during the summer, you can maintain all the progress you made during that January till the summer season, you're going to go into the holiday season way better off. And maybe you have that 6-week stretch in the fall before the holidays start where you're like, yes, I can do a little bit more. And so then you make a little bit more progress. Your body's not going to want to rebound. And all of a sudden, what you felt like would be like fluctuations up after one vacation, one day off, they're not happening. That's like the importance of maintenance and slowing down to speed up. So we're constantly progressing, even if the scale isn't necessarily decreasing and weight loss is our goal. And we have to recognize that. Not to mention, when we're doing the minimum, we're creating some pretty killer habits that we can stack off of.
Yeah. I love that because it really, I always say, like, if you are staying consistent, that is what affords you the flexibility later. And you're 100% right. So many people, it's like, oh, I got to my goal. This is it. But your body does fight. It can take up to 6 months. That's what research shows is 6 months to actually reset your weight point of where you're going to bounce back to. So that means 6 months of still making sure that you're staying in and things aren't kind of bad habits aren't creeping back in. And that's where these minimums and kind of those anchor habits really are important. And that leads to the big thing, which is if we kind of said like, oh, you may be eating too less, or maybe you're eating more and it's leading to this. You have to compare your summers. So this is a moment really that I encourage everyone to reflect. What did they do last summer? What did they see last summer? Because that's also going to help them in choosing what those minimum habits that they are actually going to employ is, as far as what do they actually want to see. So if you're someone that was like, hey, yeah, I lost weight in the summer and then I really struggled in the fall, may have been because, yeah, your activity was up, your calorie intake was down, but you were in too big of a deficit. So you were actually harming your metabolism. So come fall, you struggled. So this summer, it may be just making sure you are eating enough as you go throughout your activities. Or if you're on the opposite side of that, where you were eating quite a bit and kind of overindulged more often than not, it's looking at those habits and making sure that you have those anchor habits that's also kind of keeping you in check. So you're not all of a sudden going into the fall with, having rebounded that weight.
It's comparing seasons to seasons to see 1% improvements over what you did at the other season that really yields the best results. And it's thinking about those fundamental habits that do build and going off of the anchor habits. I think this is where it's super important we recognize these are the fundamentals that allow us to reach a goal and maintain the goal with evolution. So we might have heard all of us say this, you might have read this, but you don't do the same thing to maintain a result that you do to get down. So what you do to lose the weight is not what you do to maintain your weight. And underneath that, though, there are some fundamental habits that you're creating. And while the exact implementation of these habits will evolve, the key is that you're recognizing where they're stemming from. So when we're thinking about doing these anchor habits, these minimums during the summer, we have to go to what is the foundation of what I need to be successful, which is why often we do recommend tracking. Now, when you think about the habit of tracking, it can be done in so many different ways, but the fundamental anchor there is that what gets measured gets managed. So how can we implement some of these anchors in different ways to meet the minimums that we might need, Michelle?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that these habits still keep that, the needle moving, right? Like we're still seeing that progress. So I love that, we're talking about tracking. There are so many ways to track. My challenge is that you find what aligns best for you in this phase and you track in some way. For some, this is simply just tracking protein. For others, this is maybe they are sticking with the macros, but maybe it's a little bit easier of a macro ratio than what they've typically employed. So oftentimes we're looking at like a 30% protein or a 35% protein, kind of an even split between carbs and fat just during the summer months to allow for a little bit more flexibility when it comes to those social events that are going to have a little bit more food available to you. This is really also where, like, even using things like the plate method, and I always replace this, isn't just the plate method. I usually do like a macro plate method. So you're putting a little bit more emphasis on your protein. You're actually putting also a more emphasis on those non starchy carbs. Or even using hand portions, just something that is going to keep you tethered in some way. So you do know, and this isn't just to, like, as I mentioned before, this isn't just to make sure you're not over consuming. This is also to make sure that you are consuming enough because we so often, we are like, yeah, honor those hunger cues. Summer's a hard time to honor those hunger cues because with heat, if you're in an area that has higher temperatures, or even if you're traveling to higher temperatures, oftentimes your appetite does naturally decrease because of heat itself.
And I think with all of this too, it's understanding that we're trying to get data on what we need to make the best adjustments for us. And I bring that up because owning who we are and what we want to do is super key. And you might have those barbecues, those parties, those vacations you go on that you've always felt in the past had a lot of impact. What don't we want to do on those days? Myself included, is track. We don't really want to see those days, but guess what? It happened anyway. And I would urge you as you go into the summer months to do the opposite and track some of those days. It might not be perfectly accurate, but it can be eye opening in the impact it actually has on the rest of your week. And while I do like macrocycling and keeping the same ratio and keeping consistency and that daily consistency, because that actually shows you if a ratio works, if you're going into the summer and you've been tracking and you know what ratios sort of work for you and you know that you need a certain amount of protein, track those days that now might be creeping in that might be throwing off your weekly averages. It becomes the I've been good all week, right? Where all of a sudden the weekend's adding up and you're like, well, 5 and 2, it should be okay. But you don't realize how much you're really changing those averages over the weekend. And the more you start to recognize those through a little bit of tracking, the more maybe you do adjust your habits during the summer to account for that in the ratio you use during the week versus what you do on the weekend. Or maybe you start to say, hey, I need to evolve my weekend habits. But I think so often we just try and force the same habits at all times of week, even not only through the seasons. And then by not owning what we actually want, the changes in those routines and habits, we sabotage ourselves. So it's really using this to collect data and information to be a little bit better than. So yeah, you might have been logging a full ratio and even going 50% protein, doing mini cuts all January. Don't do too long, but using those different strategies and then get into the summer and need to go to a 30% protein minimum and find that's the max you can do. Or you just are taking pictures of food and that's holding you accountable enough. It's really knowing what's going to help you be better than because that leads to the success mindset, which helps you build even further. So, off of that, like, what are some other minimum habits you might recommend for somebody looking to meet themselves where they're at that seem a little silly, simple, I'll even say, but really create that success mindset of wanting to do more over feeling not successful? So, we kind of do anything.
Yeah. So I know we kind of touched on this before. So one, obviously track. Two, don't go empty for too long. This is really what I see with and like with upcoming travels, with just again, I know I've hit on this already, but with the summer heat improving is we just go too long without eating. And this can cause an issue for a couple of reasons. One, obviously it can make it so your overall caloric intake goes down and we can actually harm your metabolism. But we can also create a restrict binge cycle by making those eating windows too long. So if you have a travel day, you're going somewhere and you're kind of going crazy, plan at least a snack, something in your bag, something you can eat. I always say, we're going to take the infant line, but fed is best. So, making sure that we're getting some type of caloric intake in is also going to help you not get into that habit where, I haven't ate all day and you get home. And most likely are you going to grab? You're going to grab what's fast and easy. And that's not a bad thing. But if your options are, chips and ice cream in the freezer, that may be what you're heading to. And pretty soon, you may be like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna like, as you mentioned, stay in that caloric deficit because I kind of didn't eat all this day," but you can so quickly blow out a caloric deficit when you have not been eating enough to kind of just having these high calorie foods available to you. So, it's really making sure that we're not getting into that, and truthfully, that can also have a negative impact on your mindset as well when we just wait too long so that we get into that restrict binge cycle.
It can create a little, like, overcorrecting attitude of, "Oh, I'll save all my calories for these different things," and don't get me wrong, like, I think there's something to working in the foods you love if you know you have a little, less flexibility at dinner and you're going out, saving calories to those things, but we also don't want that mindset because 'cause I'll see people not eat all day to overeat, but also not fuel their workouts to be able to perform well, their energy levels to feel good during the day, so it is very key we recognize that. Plus, there are so many foods during the summer that we can really use to be refreshing even and be more fun and create that new, like, reinvigorated sense of eating well, I would say, and also your favorite thing, hydrate. But like smoothies, you can make popsicles. Like, there's so many different options. I'm gonna use the Ninja Creamy, like, every single day. Not that I don't already, but I'm planning to use it every single day during the summer and even make Ryan have some, which I don't think he'll complain about. But there's just so many options and different ways you can tweak to really even have fun during the summer and explore new opportunities in how you're fueling.
I love that. Lean into the summer flavors. This is the time, where we can be creative with some of those smoothies. We can be creative with our hydration, which you know me well because that actually is on my list. My next thing is one of those anchor habits should be hydration. So even if you're looking at kind of creating, a lemonade mint thing to kind of make sure that you are enjoying those summer flavors, but also leaning into those habits of hydration. So it really is about hydrating with intention. So you guys know I always talk about water at some point, and that really is my goal for everyone is really to try and get about that 70% of body weight in ounces. That really is going to help reduce fatigue. If you are traveling, you're going to have more energy. It's going to support that digestion, which oftentimes, again, depending on what you're doing, can often be disrupted because we are also introducing new foods, new flavors during the summer that can sometimes take a little bit of a toll on our digestion itself. This is also going to help support both muscle building and fat loss. So it's really a good time to make sure that we are leaning in to this habit and hopefully making it so it carries on into the fall and into the winter. So if that's something that you've struggled in the past, sometimes summer can be a little bit easier to remind yourself to drink those fluids, but this is really that time to build that momentum so you can carry that in through the rest of the year.
I love that, like, thinking of the things that you can do that will change habits for the future as well, because I do think we just often talk about or even think about the summer as being the time where some healthy habits we tried to implement go to die a little bit, not to be negative, but I think owning the benefits of this time of year too and how it does change your routine, like being more active. I know I want to go out for more walks, be outside a little bit more. So I know my activity level does increase in cold Southern California, but it does increase. And so I might even find different ways during the, January, February, March, April to do a little bit more muscle building, not include as much cardio. And then in the summer, steer into that cardio, even in how I design my strength workouts. But then again, also recognizing how we fuel. We talk about the summer as more party time. So, yes, there can be that tendency to overeat or macros be really off due to those days. But there can also be a tendency, as you mentioned, to underfuel. But because we might have been demonizing carbs for other reasons or used lower carb ratios in the past to lose weight, we can fear increasing carbs, which ultimately then holds us back if we are more active. So it's not only the underfueling that can have an impact, but potentially macro ratios that need to adjust, that we need to embrace things that we were potentially uncomfortable embracing before.
Yeah. So often, like it'll be like, oh, this ratio worked for me before. Well, did you consider what activity you're doing? Did you consider what your day to day is right now? Because oftentimes it is going to change. There is a little bit more walking. And this really goes to show like, my saying is life's never stagnant. Your diet can't be. And this is a prime example of that. You cannot have a stagnant diet. You have to make sure that you are truly like evaluating yourself as far as what you're actually facing, what goals you have, what sacrifices are you actually willing to make during this particular moment.
And off of that, so we can't get married to just one macro ratio. We might have to embrace having more carbs if we are being more active, doing more cardio. Maybe you're doing a lot more racing even. How can we think about building a plate that hits our macros so that we can see effective results, but maybe track in a different way than we have in the past?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with like the plate method, right? So when you're building your plate, if you were to look up the USDA recommended plate method, it's going to split the plate into half fruits and vegetables, a quarter protein, a quarter carbs. I like to actually change that a little bit. So we would actually be looking at potentially thirds. That's kind of a quick, dirty way to kind of think about this. So, really, more of a third of a protein. And we're kind of keeping that third of the plate being those non starchy fruits and vegetables, ideally. More vegetables than fruit. I like to keep fruit in the summer. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to be eating loads of watermelon. But when I'm actually building that first plate or that main plate, fruit kind of tends to stay as a snack. I'm looking at those non-starchy vegetables that are going to be higher in fiber. And then that way, when we are looking at those carbs, we are looking at those high fibrous carbs as well. This is the time where we're looking at, adding in the spaghetti squash. We're adding in those those fibrous vegetables. So sweet potatoes, an excellent one to kind of make sure that you're adding into your plate. But this doesn't need to be like a huge, massive amount. It really is making sure we're having a little bit more protein, a little bit more of the non-starchy vegetables, and then whatever is left, we're filling with those carbs. Because you're going to be getting those carbs kind of more through in your snacks as well.
But it's not demonizing the carbs if your activity level has gone up, even if lower carb worked for you at another point. And I'm not saying that everybody now just needs to go out and eat all the carbs every single day, all day. But it's being open to the opportunity evolution in so many different ways, even if you are keeping in some of the habits you already had. Like nothing, as you said, is standing still. So we need to evolve. Off of this, closing thoughts on being realistic for our lifestyle as we do the minimum and we're entering summer or even just dealing with changes at another time of year.
Yeah, I think it's just being honest. Some days you're going to have energy for the structure, for tracking, for creating recipes. And I always say, if you have the time, do something your future self is going to thank you for. So if you have the time, do a little extra meal prepping. Make sure your freezer is full of something that you can grab that's fast later on. M- Don't get in the habit of not, or get in the mindset of you don't have to do all the things. We just want to make sure we're doing the right things, the foundational things consistently. And even those things in the mounts and how intense we're doing, that can shift and that they should shift. And really make sure that what you're doing is fitting into your life. And, we always said it should be a slight challenge. I'm not saying like, oh, if it's easy, great. If it's easy, you probably aren't pushing yourself just enough, but you should make it so it fits without friction. And so, really making sure that you're finding things that you value. I'm going back up to what we kind of talked about before with the anchor habits. This should be something that you align with, that you're valuing, that you can do even on your toughest of days to make sure that you are hitting that consistency. So, anything is going to, there's always going to be things in life that are going to get in the way, whether it's the season, whether it's a holiday, whether it's travel, things are going to come up. And if you develop these skills now, you're going to make sure even later on. And I kind of look at this like this is practice for when you do have a trip coming up, when you do have that week of work that was a little extra stressful, or maybe you have a family event that was also added a little extra stress to your life, or perhaps made it so food wasn't entirely in your control because you were at kind of the mercy of others catering to you. So that is when we want to make sure we're asking these questions so you can pick and choose what those minimums are that are going to still help you moving forward.
It's planning ahead now to back off. Because when we do, it doesn't feel like we're giving up or we're going easy. What really ends up happening is so often in the moment, in a response to something, we then feel like we can do less. And that's where that guilt has almost been created over slowing down to speed up. But when you're proactively planning in that deload, it's not because you need it, it's because you need it. Right? There is a difference in how we're choosing to perceive it and how our body responds to it because it doesn't feel like we're having to give up or give in or weak or can't handle it or whatever else. It's not a negative, right? It's not in response. So the more you can plan ahead right now to be like, hey, these are the minimums I'm going to go to, especially if I feel my effort levels creeping up, or these are just things I'm going to do proactively. And if I want to do more, I can always do more. But the more you plan ahead, the more you're going to feel like this is just the plan, this is just the balance, and I can always do more over feeling like you're somehow giving in, giving up, too weak to do the other, because that's not the case. There's simply evolution in life, and the more we own it, the more we can keep moving forward. Michelle, any other final closing thoughts now that I went on that tangent?
I'm just going to end with this. I think it's always important to keep in mind, like, we aren't chasing trends. I know what everything we just went over, it's not sexy. But it's the daily actions that no one sees that really everyone actually ends up noticing, because it's going to be what keeps you moving forward and actually getting those results at the end of the day. So this is the time that's really about building that resilience and playing the long game.
Love it. Couldn't have said it better. Perfect ending. Won't say any more. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Hope all those tips helped. Would love to hear how you're doing the minimum to keep moving forward.